The Iranian situation, is it over? In a moment, Jerome Corsi joins us to talk about it on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Dr. Jerome Corsi with us, received his Ph.D. from Harvard University's Department of Government back in 1972, published a number of articles and books, and then he had received a national security clearance to work with the U.S. State Department on terrorism. Jerry, welcome back. How are you?
I'm great, George. Great to be back with you. Thank you very much.
You too. Back in 2005, you wrote your first book on Iran called Atomic Iran. What did you see to write that book?
Well, it's 2005. I was warning the world that Iran intended to make a nuclear weapon and to use it against Israel. And with Israel being a relatively small state, one nuclear weapon detonated over Tel Aviv, a weapon about the size of the weapon over Hiroshima or Nagasaki, would have destroyed the modern Jewish state as we know it. And this, since 2005, has been the kind of nightmare dream of the Iranian regime, which has had this mad anti-Israeli hatred, one to eliminate the Jewish state of Israel.
Let's go back a little bit. How did the Shah of Iran lose control of Iran?
Well, Ayatollah Khomeini came from France. He'd been in exile out of the country, and he was a radical Islamic extremist. He came back into the country in 1979, and his entrance was well received. It was a huge event in Iran, and he brought with him the Iranian Revolution, which resulted at that time in the capture of the American embassy, and we had our hostages from the American embassy for 444 days, which destroyed the presidency of Jimmy Carter. And that was the beginning of the Shah going into exile and this radical anti-Israeli regime taking hold of the Iranian government.
Was the Shah hated throughout Iran?
No, not really. I mean, the Shah was really pretty well loved. The Pahlavi family has been still embraced by many Iranians as the legitimate rulers of Iran. And Iran at that time was actually a very modern state. I mean, through the 1960s and 1970s, Iran was a fashionable, Western-oriented country until this radical Islamic revolution that Ayatollah Khomeini occasioned. And then the radical Islamists took over.
What was their relationship with Israel at that time?
Well, it was actually pretty good with the Shah. There was no real antagonism with Israel. It was just the radical Islamic influence that came in combined with a Marxist element that actually opposed Israel, was determined to destroy Israel. These Iranians and their radical extremists are Shiites, not Sunnis, and the Shiites have this vision that there needs to be an apocalypse in which the Shiite version of Islam will take over and beat the Sunnis, and the apocalypse is like a nuclear war in which Iran expects to win, and includes the destruction of Israel.
Back in 2006, you wrote a book with Michael Evans called Showdown with Nuclear Iran. What did you see then, Jerry?
Well, again, we emphasized in that book this whole idea of the Mahdi, M-A-H-D-I, which was a little boy who went into hiding down a well centuries ago. The difference between the Shiites and the Sunnis, and most Muslims are Sunnis. The Shiites, which are only really in control of Iran, they're a minority sect, believe that the Prophet Muhammad is the rightful ruler of Islam, and the family of the Prophet should be the rulers, whereas the Sunnis believe that a caliphate, a secular government, is okay with Islam. And the Shiites are very, very radical in this apocalyptic version, almost a suicidal version of Islam, that the apocalypse has to happen before they triumph, and the apocalypse is a end-of-the-world type event.
Then you wrote a book in 2009, which was kind of futuristic, Why Israel Can't Wait. Look what happened.
Well, I was predicting in that book, I went to Israel. I was there in Israel, even when Obama was in Cairo, when he was proclaiming that he experienced Islam in 3 continents. And I was there for virtually about a month or 6 weeks, met most of the government. And what was clear was that the Iranian threat was so existential, so fundamentally threatening the existence of Israel, that the leaders of Israel said that regardless of what happened, if Iran got close to having a nuclear weapon, Israel could no longer wait. At that point, Israel would have no chance but to defend Israel, regardless of what it took. Even if that were a nuclear war, even if it meant that Israel would lose, they would still defend Israel with everything Israel had.
Jerry, what did Israel know recently when they attacked Iran? They must have realized something was happening.
Well, there was intelligence, very credible intelligence, that Iran actually had 2 nuclear warheads and was capable of making more. And so once that was known, that was the Israel can't wait any longer event. And so Netanyahu, defending the country, was at a point where he really had to decide to take action to attack Iran or risk the threat of a nuclear attack from Iran on Israel, which was credible and could have, as I said, destroyed the modern Jewish state as it was. If Israel had the fear of 2 nuclear warheads, all Iran had to do is fire a barrage of, say, 5,000 missiles, 2 of which were nuclear, and there was a 70% chance, according to the intelligence estimates, that one of those 2 nuclear warheads would get through and detonate over Tel Aviv. That was a risk that Israel could no longer tolerate.
Would Iran really have done that?
Yes, in fact, I think Ayatollah Khomeini threatened it. He said actually that at one time there was going to be a world historic event. I think that was on June 22nd. He said there's a surprise tonight that the world will remember for centuries. So I think Ayatollah Khomeini thought that Iran still had its 2 nuclear warheads, but a few days earlier, China flew 5 Boeing 747s into Iran. I believe the generals in Iran, realizing that the Ayatollah had gone mad and was now suicidal, he thought he'd be a great martyr, was going to detonate those nuclear weapons over Israel. So the generals, really in a kind of a mutiny move against the Ayatollah, had China remove the weapons, and the Ayatollah was greatly surprised because there were no weapons to have his world historic event, which was going to be the destruction of Israel with what he thought were 2 nuclear warheads that Iran still had.
When Saddam Hussein was running Iraq before they killed him, didn't he kind of have a thumb on Iran?
Yes, well, Iran and Iraq had fought for 8 or 9 years a war against each other, and it was really debilitating for both countries. And Iraq felt like it had a hold over Iran in that period of time. And the war was just really suicidal on both nations. But by the time Ayatollah Khomeini came into power, Iran was going in a very, very radical direction. And through presidents like Ahmadinejad, I was actually in the United Nations reporting at that time for WorldNet Daily when Ahmadinejad referred to the Mahdi and swore that Iran was going to have death to Israel and death to the United States. Israel was the little Satan, we were the great Satan, in Ahmadinejad's view.
Why can't they just get along, Jerry?
Well, I think that's really where President Trump is, that we've been having this hatred for now decades, and the Abraham Accords, I think, for President Trump are the future, which is this vow that the Muslim nations are going to accept the existence of Israel and look towards economic development of the region, which Israel can provide. Israel is a very technologically advanced country and would be able to provide prosperity to the region. So countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are very seriously looking at expanding these Abraham Accords. And I think you're going to find countries like Syria and Lebanon, Syria and Libya, not Lebanon, but Syria and Libya, going to join the Abraham Accords and vow to work with Israel, whereas countries like Lebanon and Egypt are still very radical and very dug in their opposition to Israel. But that's changing in the Middle East, and I think President Trump is having a major influence over that change.
And the late Muammar Gaddafi never would have cut a deal with Israel, would he?
No, Gaddafi never would have cut a deal with Israel. And it was really Hillary Clinton who was determined to eliminate Gaddafi. She was concerned about the gold dinar that Gaddafi wanted to create, and also Hillary Clinton and at that time Stu Blumenthal had really coveted controlling the Libyan oil. Hillary Clinton at that time was also very surreptitiously and illegally bringing arms into the Middle East through Libya that were ending up in the Middle East going through Turkey. And that story got exposed at the time, has largely been forgotten, but Hillary Clinton was very active, involved in arms smuggling at that time. And it was really a tragedy to get rid of Gaddafi because Libya got destabilized as a result. But today, Libya is making overtures. My good friend Philip Escaravage, who I was working with back in 2015, he was reporting out of Libya and wants to again be an envoy with Libya. I believe Libya is positioned to receive Palestinians who want to settle there voluntarily and is going to be a force for positive change, along with Syria, surprisingly, now that Assad is gone. So I think the Middle East has a great potential to embrace these Abraham Accords and to embrace Trump's idea of peace through prosperity.
And Gaddafi was not a Boy Scout. I remember when Reagan bombed his family.
Yes, I remember that too. He sent an air attack out of London and basically put some missiles down Gaddafi's toilet, and it changed Gaddafi's attitude very significantly at the time. But Gaddafi was radical. He wanted to have a African Union that was going to be opposed to the United States, their own currency. Gaddafi was very much trying to get African unity on, again, a Muslim basis, but one that was at that time very opposed to the United States.
President Trump jumped in the war between Israel and Iran. Was that necessary?
I think it was because, again, we are the dominant power in the world, and President Trump has been very, very committed to the survival of Israel. He moved our embassy in Israel to Jerusalem in his first term, and that was, again, a world historic decision, similar to 1948 when President Truman allowed the division of Palestine in order to create the State of Israel. And it was a very, very a bold move by President Trump because it acknowledged Jerusalem to be a Jewish capital. And, of course, Jerusalem has been contested by, Christians have a strong tie to Jerusalem, and so do Muslims. So this was a very strong move to move the embassy, United States Embassy, from Tel Aviv into Jerusalem. And President Trump took that move in his first term.
So Israel was doing its own job on Iran, wasn't it?
Yes, well, Israel, I met with, after I wrote Atomic Iran, I began advising the Israeli government. I was there many, many times, and I had a meeting with Uri Lubrani, who at that time in the Ministry of Defense in Tel Aviv, we had an almost all-day meeting. He was born in Iran, spoke Farsi as his first language, and he was at that time beginning to send infiltrators, Iranian, into Iran. These were Israeli operatives who were going to penetrate the military, the scientific community. And during this current war, they were activated. So a lot of the generals were killed. A lot of the scientific leaders were killed. It was really a decapitation of a whole level of the elite society in Iran. And it was a surreptitious operation, but it stemmed back to 2005 and 2006 with Uri Lubrani. And it was very successful in this current war.
Jerry, think about this question as we come back from the break. Are we going to ask for regime change in Iran? Think about that. Dr. Jerome Corsi with us. His website, CorsiNation.com, is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. And we will be back with him in a moment on Coast to Coast, talking more about the situation between Israel, Iran, and us in just a moment on Coast to Coast. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Dr. Jerome Corsi as we talk about Iran and Israel. What about the possibilities, Jerry, of a regime change in Iran? Possible?
Well, it's possible. President Trump has declared that he's not going to press regime change as the primary objective of the United States. And certainly there's no intention to occupy Iran with U.S. troops. The United States has done very well, brilliantly, on our quick military attacks. This B-2 attack was an example of a really quite devastating and brilliant surprise attack. But when we occupy countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, it's a failure. There's no way we can produce stability in the Middle East unless it comes internally from within the Middle East. And I think President Trump recognizes that. I think there's a possibility of regime change within Iran, but it's going to come from within Iran, from the Iranian people themselves. And that chapter is yet to play out. It's just beginning right now. But I don't think there's any possibility that the United States is going to declare regime change as our primary objective.
What are the possibilities that in Iran they will continue to rebuild their nuke program?
It's going to take time. I mean, the destruction from this B-2 attack was devastating. The rubble makes it impossible even to get into some of these facilities. Some of them were also destroyed from within by Israeli operatives. The damage to the setback to Iran is significant, and it's going to take years for Iran to recover, if ever, to where they were in enriching uranium. And I think the regime is going to proclaim that it wants to do so, but the technical capability is just not there now, and recovering that's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time.
North Korea is pumping in thousands of troops with Russia into Ukraine. Are we concerned about them? They have nukes.
Well, we are, but I don't think at the moment the possibility of Ukraine going into a nuclear war is there. I think right now President Trump has taken the most effective step to end the war, which is to stop funding Zelensky and to stop providing military arms. Without money, Zelensky and Ukraine are going to quickly have to end the war. And I think Donald Trump recognizes that that's the best solution. Zelensky would like to continue the war. Ukraine's still a corrupt country. Zelensky has had his wife going on $1 million jewelry buys, and he's got mansions all over the place and is known for doing a lot of cocaine. He's an actor, and he's wearing a costume with this military uniform. But the truth, which has not been reported in the United States, is that the western part of Ukraine has been sending these neo-Nazi brigades into these two Russian-speaking provinces for years, including under Poroshenko, the previous head of Ukraine. And they even started attacking and killing clerics in the Russian Orthodox Church. So the real provocateurs, I believe, in Ukraine are the United States and the State Department under Obama and Biden pushing, the United States and NATO right to the edge of Russia, which is very provocative. And these attacks into these two provinces, which I think provoked finally, especially after the Minsk Accords were violated largely by Boris Johnson, that war could have been prevented, and I believe would have been prevented had Donald Trump had his second term in 2020.
One of our news guests, Dr. John Curtis, Jerry, believes that Putin was justified in doing what he did.
Well, I think there is justification because, these two provinces have been aligned with Russia for like 1,000 years. That came out in Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin, and Putin really just defended the Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine. Ukraine's a divided country. The eastern part of Ukraine has largely been aligned with Russia. The western part was pro-Nazi even in World War II and is still have neo-Nazi symbols and brigades. So there's a real division in Ukraine. It's not a united country. And I think that Putin was defending the Russian-speaking population that wants their independence, and I don't see there's any possibility without a nuclear war that Russia will ever give up the territory, certainly not now, that it's held on these two Russian-speaking provinces in the eastern part of Ukraine and Crimea.
So we have a ceasefire now between Israel and Iran. How long will that stay?
Well, hopefully it'll stay for a long time because I think Donald Trump wants to stop the killing so that we can have a period to try to negotiate something with Iran. Iran, again, will probably not want, the mullahs certainly will not want to renounce their nuclear ambitions. But again, if we apply not military, but economic sanctions on Iran, particularly sanctioning the oil exports, Iran will have a very difficult time with economic survival. And if the people of Iran begin to run out of food and become suffering from economic distress, the mullah regime could be very shaky in the immediate future.
President Obama gave Iran boxes of cash. What was that for?
Well, again, with John Kerry, and I opposed John Kerry, of course, when I co-authored Unfit for Command in 2004 with John O'Neill, Swiftboat book against John Kerry. John Kerry negotiated under Obama a so-called treaty with Iran, and Obama sent them cargo planes full of cash as kind of a bribe not to develop nuclear weapons during his term. But the deal that Kerry negotiated allowed, over time, Iran to develop nuclear weapons and said that as a sovereign state they had a right to do so. And, of course, that's really a dangerous policy because, as I wrote in, Why Israel Can't Wait, it inevitably would threaten the existential survival of Israel and would cause a war. So, when I wrote that book in 2011, I was predicting there would come an Israel-Iran war, and now it's happened.
Jerry, explain what the Abraham Accords are.
The Abraham Accords go back to the idea that Abraham in the Bible was the progenitor of both what ended up being Islam and, Christianity or the Judeo-Christian tradition. And the Abraham Accords are a promise from the Muslim states that they will accept the existence of a Jewish state of Israel and will work with Israel on economic development, renouncing war and renouncing the idea that their goal is to eliminate Israel. And that's a fundamental change. And I do believe right now President Trump has an opportunity to have the Abraham Accords sweep across the Middle East. I've said since I wrote Atomic Iran in 2005 that the only solution in the Middle East is economic prosperity. We've got to renounce war. One war just leads to the next war. People are killed, and then there's revenge, and war is not the solution. The solution is what President Trump is trying to pursue, and that is peace.
Are there sleeper Iranian cells in the United States?
Most likely, yes. Clearly, they have not been activated, and a number of Iranians have been picked up by the Department of Homeland Security, and so there's concern about it. I'm not sure it's a really significant threat at this point, but again, with the decisive military blow we had on Iran, Iran's really been set back, and in the Middle East, fundamental changes have gone on. Hamas has been largely deactivated in the Gaza. Hezbollah, also funded by Iran, has been decapitated in Lebanon. Assad is out of Syria. So we really have a fundamental rollback of radical Islam in the Middle East that has not occurred since Ayatollah Khomeini came on the scene in 1979 with his Islamic revolution in Iran.
Friday, we celebrate 249 years as a nation, Jerry. Is it conceivable that something very bad could happen?
Well, we've always got to be concerned about that, and I think the country will be on alert. But right at the moment, I think that the nation's pretty much celebrating still Donald Trump's victory. The passage of this funding bill, the one big beautiful bill, which happened today, is another indication that Donald Trump is doing well politically. And I think the country is relaxing that we did not have an expanding war either in Ukraine or in Israel versus Iran.
What's going on with Israel and Hamas?
Well, Israel right now is probably will be stopped on the continuing incursion into Gaza. The Gaza Strip is largely rubble right now, And Hamas is not entirely out of the Gaza, but largely inactive. And I think that the future, I believe Donald Trump is going to try to not repopulate the Gaza Strip with Palestinians. I believe there will be an effort from countries like Libya and others to welcome Palestinians in economic prosperity. Donald Trump has talked about developing northern Africa and the Gaza as the Riviera of the Mediterranean, and that can be done. It wouldn't take American taxpayer dollars. All Donald Trump would have to do is provide government guarantees, and private capital would certainly look at this as a opportunity to put private money into developing resorts all along northern Africa and into the Gaza. It's a beautiful area. I mean, if you take a look at northern Africa, there's really abundant Roman ruins. Even the ancient Romans realized that the Mediterranean in North Africa was a very hospitable place, and we could have prosperity with private capital, provided the U.S. government pursues a policy of guaranteeing the initial private capital that would have to go into the infrastructure development.
With Dr. Jerome Corsi, one of his books includes the final analysis he wrote last year. What's going on with the possibility of world peace? Is that conceivable?
I think it's actually conceivable, maybe for the first time in world history, that we could reach a recognition that any conflict, any war, could escalate into a nuclear war, which is a catastrophic possibility.
Yes.
And so I think the world has got to come to a recognition that war itself has to be abandoned as an antique idea that is not productive in terms of how human relations. So we need to learn how to live with each other and find ways to encourage mutual prosperity around the globe. If we could do that, I think the tensions in the world would be dramatically reduced. And we have to learn how to accept one another despite our differences without having war be our solution. War is not a solution. It's a cause of the problem, and it only perpetuates turmoil and discord.
Jerry, China seems to be very quiet lately these days.
Well, certainly when we had the B-2 bombing of Iran, and we sent a contingent of B-2 bombers to Guam, that was clearly a signal to China that they should probably take occupying Taiwan off the table. So I think right now, Chinese invasion of Taiwan has been postponed indefinitely. Donald Trump has really asserted U.S. military in a way that has not been asserted, going back to presidencies including Bill Clinton. And now recruitment is on the rise. I think our military is back to being controlled by warriors. And I think the United States military strength, as Ronald Reagan said, peace through strength, is going to be the policy that could possibly restore peace worldwide.
And these immigration raids primarily are aimed at crooks, robbers, and thieves.
Yes, there's a determined effort by the Department of Homeland Security to focus on criminal illegal aliens. And that distinction has been strongly enforced. And there's millions of really criminals that we've allowed into the country. When Obama and Biden opened the borders, especially after 2011, with the agreement with Honduras, which really opened the borders under the Biden regime. So a lot of criminals in Venezuela emptied their jails. We see Venezuelan gangs operative in Colorado and other places in the country. The criminal element is what has to be removed. That's primarily the threat. And I believe the Department of Homeland Security will focus on that distinction, not just going after immigrants in general, but illegal immigrants in particular.
What are you working on these days, Jerry?
Well, I've got a new investigation that's going to be disclosed about Act Blue. Act Blue is not just the stealing of identities in order to make contributions to Democratic political campaigns, but it stems back to agreements that were made with Honduras and the Biden regime. And Sean Taylor, who was a assistant police chief in Tennessee, has documented that we were, under the Biden administration, funneling money from child sex trade across the border, from fentanyl from China and cocaine and crack cocaine from the Sinaloa cartel into the United States, funneled into banks like TD Bank. And there was a scheme from these democratic non-governmental organizations, NGO, at the top level in Act Blue. You had officials buying million-dollar homes, and the money laundering was giving them bank loans, mortgage loans of $150 million. So there were billions of dollars being funneled through these evil sources into democratic operatives like Black Lives Matter and Antifa and anti-American organizations. This is going to be a massive scandal, and it's fully documented. I've actually turned over the information, got the information into the Department of Justice, and you're going to see the examination of this crime expanding from just the identity theft of donations into Democratic political campaigns into this entire scheme of funding NGOs that are anti-American with this evil source of money that stems back to child sex trade, fentanyl from China, and cocaine and crack cocaine from the Sinaloa cartel. And it was all orchestrated by Joe Biden and the Obama administration. It's fully documented. I'm going to begin my first articles in this will begin appearing next week.
All right, stay with us. Dr. Jerome Corsi is with us. We're going to take calls with Jerry next hour here on Coast to Coast. A couple of his other books include The Assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It's an incredible work. His website is CorsiNation.com, and he is one of the best researchers and investigators out there. He used to write for WorldNet Daily. Then he went off on his own for a number of years, and he's back with us talking about issues that affect all of us. Welcome back, George Norrie, along with Dr. Jerome Corsi, as we talk about world events. Jerry, would you be in favor of regime change in Iran?
Yes, I would. I think that this regime is really a totalitarian regime. They're very repressive on the Iranian people, and their determination to destroy Israel is insane and only productive of war and a future attempt to, again, develop nuclear weapons. It's a very dangerous regime, and it needs to go, but I am not in favor of the United States imposing regime change or invading the country.
Why is that?
I don't think it works. We had not a successful attempt to occupy Iraq. We didn't do well in Afghanistan. The United States is very capable of quick and decisive military action to achieve a particular purpose. That was effective going after Iraq when we initially attacked Iraq. It was effective in Afghanistan, and it was effective again with Iran with the recent B-2 strike. But the prolonged occupations are a bad idea and only make us the enemy over a long period of time in a region that has been unstable, and we can't make it stable by an occupation.
Let's go to the phones. Brandon's with us, truck driving in Pennsylvania. Hello, Brandon. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, George, for everything you do. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so basically I moved here. I'm basically, my name is Brandon because I'm a Christian Pakistani. Moved here back in 1994. It's been 31 great years in America. The reason I left Pakistan because I got tired of eating chicken curry. I wanted to come here and have cheeseburgers and wanted to have Heineken, okay?
Don't eat too many cheeseburgers, though. Don't eat too many of them.
Yeah, no, I ate enough. And I'm 51, so I don't eat them anymore. So the thing is that, listen, I left my culture there because I was done with it, okay? I wanted to adapt here, became American, and I watch baseball, okay? So the problem now we have, America needs to wake up. These people coming in from other cultures, and they bring in their cultures here, and they hate America, okay? And they just basically is using the system of America, America needs to wake up, otherwise we're going to have a big problem. I've seen a big change in the last 30 years, okay? It's almost like I used to live in New York, used to go eat hot dogs, and now the hot hot dog stands are gone, okay?
Interesting take. Jerry, how dangerous is this immigration?
Well, I think immigration needs to be controlled, and we need to know who's coming into the country so that we can have people who are peaceful and who are going to be loyal to the United States and ultimately citizens. So I think controlled immigration is very positive for the country, but uncontrolled immigration is very dangerous. So this gentleman has made some good comments, and I support the idea of immigration rules being enforced, but yet having the opportunity to come into the country being an open one for those who really want to be here and want to be productive.
Brian's with us in Indianapolis, east of the Rockies. Go ahead, Brian.
Hey, George, good morning, sir. How are you?
Okay, buddy. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, I'd like to say happy birthday, man, to this experiment called our constitutional republic. 249 years. I can't believe it's our country is that old. But Dr. Corsi, it's an honor to talk to you, and your insight on the geopolitical things are pretty cool. I have kind of a two-part question. Now, our big, beautiful bill that they just passed, you know, it has some good things in it, some bad things in it. The worst thing it has in it, that it's adding to our national deficit, okay? Now, if all these mechanisms that's in this bill, which I have no idea what they are, but they talk about them, if they come to fruition, the deficit won't be as bad. So now my question is, the deficit that we face today is growing, you know, just through the roof. It's a two-part question. Number one, what kind of threat is our national deficit to this country and the BRICS nations that are coming up in 2 days? What kind of a threat are they to our national security and our national interests? And I'll take my answers off the air, and I love the Coach family.
Thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Jerry.
Very interesting question. First of all, this bill does increase spending, and I think Donald Trump realized that at the moment, given the deficits that we've had kind of exponentially increasing under the Biden administration, you can't just cut off that flow of money without causing a massive economic downturn. So you can't just cut off the spending. And Donald Trump made a decision to try to grow the country into prosperity, which funding and continuing funding will do in the short run. Now, long run, I don't think we can rely upon Congress to cut ever, because Congress is just going to keep spending. Politicians are going to keep spending in order to please their constituents and keep the money flowing. In this bill, I think, is a solution. And Donald Trump is saying, let's not repeat things that don't work in the Middle East or in the economics. Let's try something fundamentally different. So part of the solution here is to create a cryptocurrency sovereign fund, and various cryptocurrencies can be put into this. But, for instance, if you take XRP, and I own some XRP, but the point is, I'll disclose that fully, but if you take XRP and say the Social Security recipients, especially those under 40 years old, that you could get your Social Security in XRP or dollars. Well, the dollars are rapidly diminishing in value. XRP is at $2 a token or a unit. It could go to $2,000 a unit, and it would be tightly controlled by a private company which could control the supply. So if we take certain, especially in these non-discretionary spending, the spending that has to be made, even Medicare, Medicaid, and we try to fund some of that with cryptocurrency, take it off the balance sheet from the dollar, we might have a chance to get the dollar on better footing. Ultimately, I think the dollar is going to have to be based again by gold. The BRICS nations are a threat. The BRICS nations do want to create a possibly gold-backed or current or commodity-backed currency, and this meeting coming up in Rio de Janeiro on July 6th, just 2 days from now, is going to be well worth watching, because I do think the BRIC nations are disruptive in their willingness and determination to de-dollarize. And gold, of course, is soaring and will continue to soar. I foresee a gold going to $4,000 an ounce.
Wow.
And I see silver going to over $70 an ounce within the not-too-distant future.
These BRICS nations, do they have the clout, Jerry?
Yes, they have a large percentage of the world GNP, and they are developing nations. China, you've got now some of the Middle Eastern countries in it. Saudi Arabia did not join yet. But you're getting a expanding group of countries that want to join the BRICS. And I do think that the fiat dollar, we cannot have $37 trillion in debt go to $57 trillion of debt. The United States already had 2 downgrades. Moody's just downgraded the United States' credit rating. And it is a problem Donald Trump's going to have to address next. But I expect to see cryptocurrency taking a role in the future financial management of the world. And Donald Trump, I think, is setting the stage for that, even with provisions on cryptocurrency that are in this bill.
Let's go to John in Wisconsin. Hi, John.
Hello, George. Hello, Dr. Corsi. I have a brief comment, a question, and then a very brief comment after my question. Dr. Corsi, you get my vote for ambassador to the Middle East. You have a way of laying things out that would be effective, plus your knowledge of the culture is extraordinary. I also want to thank you for your support of the Trump administration and their efforts to bring world peace. We need that support and encouragement. Thank you. The Middle East is such a mess, and I know that passive communications through difficult regimes never works. My question is, do you think through strong, firm, peace through strength diplomacy, we can actually bring peace to that area, or are we possibly on a path there that will lead to a very bad ending? And then my comment is, I know you have a Harvard education, and Harvard has taken some hits over the last couple of years. I visited Harvard when my niece was a student there from 2013 to 2017. The students and faculty she introduced to me to were wonderful. They took hours giving me a tour of the university, explaining the history of the donors, the culture of the buildings. It was absolutely fabulous. Dr. Corsi, congratulations on your education. Thank you for all you do. Keep up the good work. And, George, thank you for taking my call.
Okay, John.
Well, I'm very pleased to have had an opportunity to get my PhD from Harvard, and Harvard has got a great tradition. I think it does need to balance itself more fully, moving away from a woke agenda, and I believe Harvard will take steps to that. I've been a member of the Harvard Club of New York for 25 years nearly now, and I truly value my education there, and I'm grateful for it. With regards to the Middle East, I think Donald Trump is, again, renouncing old ideas which don't work. And he's trying for a new approach. And I do believe that peace through prosperity, the countries of the Middle East, once they accept, okay, Israel's here, and it's not going to be eliminated without a nuclear war, which is unthinkable. Now, countries of the Middle East, Muslim countries, and I think Libya and Syria are going to start taking a lead in this. And my good friend Philip Ascaravage, I would hope he gets to be appointed a special envoy. He's got really great influence in Libya. Once the Middle Eastern countries decide to work with Israel, we could make the Middle East bloom. It's got wonderful area for growing crops with hydroponics and the technology that Israel's got. We could grow 3 crops a year out of that desert, and we could feed the world. So again, there's tremendous potential in the Middle East. If the countries simply renounce war and begin to work together, we could have the Middle East bloom, and that's my hope for the future.
Jerry, why do you think we got involved in the Iran attack? Israel seemed to have been doing it all on their own.
Well, I think we needed a massive attack. In other words, the problem with Iran was the installations were deeply embedded underneath mountains. It was going to take these blowing up huge weaponry, buster bunker bombs, which they're very, very expensive, very heavy. Needed the B-2 bombers to really be able to effectively deliver them. And these B-2 bombers are remarkable machines. I mean, they cost about several $1 billion each. And the crews were flying over 36 hours being refueled flying from the middle of the United States across to Iran and back without stopping. These are tremendous stealth weapons. So the United States power needed to be effectively used to have one strike and to put significant damage on Iran's nuclear capabilities. And that happened. And it was game-changing. But I am not in favor of a long or prolonged war. I'm not in favor of an occupation. I think Iran's got to settle itself from within. And if we go to economic sanctions again, I believe the people of Iran will take effective action. I believe the military are already headed in the direction of replacing the mullahs.
Next up is Brian in Lake Mills, Wisconsin. Brian, go ahead.
Hi, George. Hi, Dr. Corey.
Hi, Brian.
Love the show. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
I worked with Joseph Brendan Quinn in 2016 and 2020. We were working on cleaning up the elections in Wisconsin. The late Mr. Quinn was a retired general. He was largely responsible for cleaning up the elections in Florida, 2000 and 2018. He was part of the Brooks Brothers riots. Election integrity was his passion. So in 2020, on a counter-surveillance mission, we caught Henry Kissinger working out of senior executive services in the Pentagon, and he was recorded working with China and Iran and others to rig our elections. So on the eve of Thanksgiving in 2020, Henry Kissinger and others in senior executive services were fired from the Pentagon. What do you know, Dr. Corsi, about senior executive services and election integrity?
Do you know anything about that, Jerry?
Yes, well, I've done a lot of work on election integrity. If you go to my 501c3, which is gods5stones.com, that's G-O-D, no apostrophe in the S, and I spell out five, F-I-V-E, stones is plural, gods5stones.com. You'll see we feature the work of Dr. Paquette, who found there are algorithms, codes in the State Board of Election voter registration files that allow for the creation of millions of duplicate false records that can be hidden back in the database and used in these mail-in ballot schemes. Now, our work is being used. I'm working with President Trump's attorney, Peter Ticktin, T-I-C-K-T-I-N. Been doing it since the Trump administration took power in January. And the executive order that President Trump issued in March of this year specified that the states are going to have to go to new registrations. All the existing state registrations are corrupt beyond belief and subject to fraud. And yes, Christopher Wray did suppress reports that the FBI had that China was interfering with the computers during the election. So Donald Trump will, I believe, issue in September, August or September this year. It's already being prepared. I have on my desk a 17-page memo of the new provisions that are being drafted. As Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, I believe, will say that there's a national security emergency. Foreign countries can penetrate our elections. These algorithms are evidence of it. And we will go to new registrations, which require voter ID, proof of citizenship, and getting rid of the computers altogether in order to go to paper balloting, paper counting, a very severe limitation on mail-in ballots, going back to the old absentee ballot system, eliminating these mail-in ballot drop boxes, eliminating voting harvesting. We're going to have the 2026 midterm elections, I believe, run under rules which will ensure voter integrity. And it's a necessary change. 2020 election was stolen, and Donald Trump is going to prove that. And I believe the proof is evident because the scheme was, because we found the algorithms, they were not used in the presidential election in 2024. As you'll notice, all 7 of the battleground states on election night quit counting and voted for Donald Trump. We would have caught them had they done what they did in 2020, continue the counting until they had enough mail-in ballots printed fraudulently to have elected Joe Biden. And these changes are coming, and I've been working with Peter Ticktin to help engineer them. Go to gods5stones.com. You can see the full evidence of that.
Slower system, but it works, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And we can't have the computers. We can't have the electronic interference. There's too much foreign ability to penetrate our elections. Whoever put these cryptographic schemes in, their intelligence agency complexity. And it would not surprise me at all that the CIA was the engineer and Five Eyes taking this election interference with the intelligence agencies across the world. I've seen evidence of the same schemes in the EU and Venezuela and around the world. We need to have fair elections and voter integrity, or we lose our fundamental freedoms.
Back in a moment with Dr. Jerome Corsi and take final calls on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back, George Norrie, Dr. Jerome Corsi. Jerry, do you think world peace is really achievable?
I think so, George. I mean, I want to at least hope we can achieve it. I mean, war does not work. We've been doing war now for the whole course of human history, and war just breeds the next war. So fundamentally, we've got to stop doing things that don't work and try to find solutions that do work. And peace certainly works, and I believe peace can be achieved through prosperity. And I think if we pursue economic ideas based on private enterprise that stimulate and encourage people to be productive, people who are solidly middle class and comfortable are not going to want to go to war. That's got to be the future of the human race, I believe, if we're going to survive through a nuclear age.
Let's go to final calls. Donato is with us in Atlantic County, New Jersey. Welcome to the show. Hi, Donato.
Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for taking the call.
Sure thing.
Dr. Corsi, I have several issues with some of the things you said. Hope you'll allow me to make my points here. I found very interesting at the very beginning of the program, you spoke, I think correctly, about the eschatology aspect of the Shiite Muslims and their role. But what I think is very sad and very terrifying is that there's absolutely, this is more of, while what you say may be true, this is more of a psychological projection of the Talmudists, and here in America, the absolutely mentally ill Christian Zionists and their eschatology, who are about to bring about the Third World War. You know, we keep hearing about the regime changes. Why don't we start with Israel? The fact that they have Talmudic madmen who are looking to rebuild the Third Temple, sacrifice the red heifer. Okay, Benjamin Netanyahu was, you can see the video footage of him 30 years ago with Rabbi Schneerson talking about bringing about Mashiach. This is absolutely insane. And you combine that with mentally ill people like Mike Huckabee, Pete Hegseth, and Lindsey Graham, and their warped, completely heretical ideology, if you want to call it that, of Christian Zionism, where their best buddy, Jesus, will be coming out of the sky with the rapture. Not even the angels in heaven know when our Lord will return. So they're just absolutely sick, these people. And I believe they're the ones who are going to bring about a Third World War with their eschatological goals.
Your thoughts, Jerry?
Well, that was quite a mouthful. The people who rail against Zionism, to my estimate, over years and years, have just a fundamental anti-Semitic bias to them. And so that kind of a tirade is just hard to respond to because it has so many emotional and irrational elements to it. I'm not saying that Israel's perfect, but I am saying that war and the pursuit of war is not going to solve the problems. Peace with strength is important, as Ronald Reagan demonstrated, and I don't think we should have hatred of Jews. I don't think we should have hatred of Muslims. I don't think we should have hatred of anyone. And I do think all religions need to go through a reformation. Certainly Christianity has gone through a reformation. We're not doing crusades any longer. And I believe the human race can evolve to a point where we understand that laying down the sword is a way to advance civilization. And certainly in a nuclear age, that's going to become essential.
Mike in Fairbanks, Alaska is up next. Go ahead, Michael.
Hello, George and Mike. Mike north of the Rockies here. How are you guys? Excellent information tonight, Doctor. I've got a split-level comment and question. I don't know if you guys ever heard of a Moab bomb going off, the mother of all airburst bombs, but I lived at China Lake Naval Base. I heard one going off. We felt it and heard it in 2009. It was almost caused my ears to ring. It was so loud. It went off on range 70. The last one they let off was in 2019. And after that, in 2019, on July 4th, they had a 6.4 earthquake. The next day, 7.1. Well, just before that, my daughter called me when I was moving the family up north. We had a house out in the desert. She said they let off another one. It almost broke our big new glass pane windows. They're so loud and terrifying. If you've ever heard one, I don't know anything that could stand up against that. I mean, that bomb went off 20 miles away, and it sounded like it was right next door. But my questions are, the auto pen, does that negate Ketanji Brown's Supreme Court position? And also, Doctor, is there eventually going to be one massive corporate ultra box store controlling our purchases, our buying and our selling? And if we're not good, they will raise our prices on each individual.
Well, to begin with, the Moab bomb, like the bunker buster bombs, are just horrific weapons, just one kind of grade below nuclear. I mean, they're massive in impact and terrifying. In terms of the box stores, I think that the box stores really under the free trade, which took so much manufacturing out of the United States and reduced the middle class, probably are a passing phenomenon to some extent, although I believe certain of the large box stores will continue to exist. I think you're going to see increasing competition. And reviving manufacturing in the United States, I believe, will revive the middle class, which is fundamental. Going back to Aristotle, it's clear that what you need for a stable society is a strong, stable middle class, which is growing and prosperous. That's always been the formula for peace and prosperity. And I believe President Trump's on that path, and I'm pleased to see the tariffs coming back in to readjust equal basis American manufacturing, not giving over to slave labor in countries like China.
Let's go to Max in Chicago. Welcome to the show, Max. Go ahead.
Hello, George. It's an honor to talk to Jerome Corsi, one of my faves, world class.
You got him.
My question is, in addition to, you being aware, and, you're not the only one that's aware that the elections need to go back to the handwritten form to keep them free and fair, would the people that were up at the top of our intelligence agencies, which I'm sure are just as aware or even more so than, you and your group and people who believe that, should anyone and will anyone be held accountable for this? Because that would be a very serious offense to our nation. What's your position on that?
The Department of Justice is moving towards enforcing election integrity laws, and this task force that President Trump put in effect under Tulsi Gabbard, which includes the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, is already in the process in various states of identifying criminal violations. So I do believe there will be criminal charges brought after this next executive order, which establishes, I believe, voter IDs, proof of citizenship, and gets rid of the computers altogether in the election system. So I think we're headed in the right direction, and I believe we will get accountability.
Jerry, you know President Trump, don't you?
I've known President Trump for about 45 years. I was a VIP guest in one of my careers in finance when he owned the Plaza Hotel. And I found Donald Trump to be a very gracious man. And contrary to the public view of him in many ways, I mean, Donald Trump would put on a hard hat and go with the construction crews. He hired minorities. He worked with the unions in New York. I got to know him quite well in New York, and I'm a great admirer of Donald Trump. And I think he's a brilliant thinker, a brilliant tactician. And I believe that God has come more into his life after he narrowly escaped 2 assassination attempts, especially the one in Pennsylvania where a slight turn of his head at the right moment saved his life. That had to be a God intervention to preserve his life, and I believe Donald Trump used it that way.
My late friend Ron Rice, who owned Hawaiian Tropic, started that company, loved Donald Trump.
He's a remarkable human being, and when he grew up, his family attended Norman Vincent Peale's church in Manhattan, and Norman Vincent Peale wrote a book in the 50s called The Power of Positive Thinking, and I believe that was a great influence on Donald Trump's life. Donald Trump always sees himself as winning. He can suffer through tremendous hardships and yet come out on top. I've always said about Donald Trump that he always is capable. He always looks like he's going to win or lose. He always looks like he's going to lose right up until the moment when he wins. And that's constantly his theme. He always looks like he's in difficulty, and then he comes out on top, even losing the 2020 election, which I believe was stolen, and then winning a huge victory in 2024. That's typical of Donald Trump. He's a winner, not a loser.
When he does lose, though, can he do it graciously?
Well, to the extent that he can, I guess, but often with the attacks he's undergone, especially in all these prosecutions when he was out of office, it's hard to be gracious when you're under attack, which is that politically motivated and that little based in true law.
Cornelius is with us in Louisiana. Hello there, Mr. White.
Hey there, George and Jerome. Happy birthday, America.
Yep.
Look, Mr. Corsi, they call me the God Guns and Gold Man, the Bible Bullets and Beans Man down here in Voodoo, Hoodoo, and Udo, Louisiana. And George, I got to commend you. John's been sick for a while. That's why he hadn't called in. I was going to ask for prayer for John in Wisconsin. And he told me you gave me a shout-out about AI. So I'm going to hit Jerome Corsi with the Bible and AI. Everybody knows I call AI the Antichrist intelligence, Jerome. And also, I support President Trump. I've been a big supporter. I'm a mega MAGA. But I don't like him working with AI, and he has this Stargate program called AI. Like I said, I call it the Antichrist intelligence. And if you read the Bible, you know, that's his story. I call it history, but it's his story. Psalm 93, their wars, the Ezekiel wars. So you're not going to be able to stop these wars. There's a war in heaven right now with the fallen angels and God's guardian angels. But we ought to be prepared. George, I want to salute you. This, I call it a reset too in Rio. But what's that guy's name? The world, I can't think of it. The guy said by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy. They're still on course, Jerome, but we can push them back. But I don't think you'll get computers out of elections or anything. But nobody's going to be held accountable. You were right about Christopher Wray. He tried to steal the election with the Communist Chinese. He knew about it. The Albany FBI office warned that the Communist Chinese, and they're here now. They got sleeper cells here along with the Iranians. So be aware, people. Anything can happen. God bless you, George, and God bless you, Jerome.
Comments, Jerry?
Well, I think AI is going to be here to stay, and it's a computer program. It's not magic. It's not divine. It's a program that can be very flawed and very biased. We're going to have to learn how to deal with AI, just like we're going to have to deal with quantum computer. So we're into a world that's recognizing, the relativity theory that is going to be our future perception of reality. And we're going to have to deal with AI, but it has to be carefully controlled, and it's got to realize that it's not God. It's just a human invention. It's limited, and it can be very biased. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we can apply AI to our benefit, but we have to be very cautious in its application.
Jerry, is your latest book The Final Analysis?
Yes, I also have written a book called Disease X, which is talking about future pandemic possibilities. I wrote that with Todd Callender, who's a good friend, and really brilliant on this whole issue of looking at viruses and pandemics, etc., and bioweaponizing diseases, which is just a bad idea altogether. And I also wrote a book called on the Anti-Globalist Manifesto. I'm very opposed to globalism. I don't think we're going to have a one-world government or a one-world order that is productive. I think we need to have freedom and democracy, go back to families, go back to God. My values are very traditional, and I'm a strong believer in Jesus Christ. I profess that openly, and I look forward to the future. I think we've got a very positive future. We will always have to fight evil. We will always have a war against crime, against bad influences worldwide. But I think we can solve that without going to war. We can solve it without hate. We've got to come to a greater understanding to survive as a human species in a nuclear age.
Well said. Dr. Jerome Corsi. Up next, Chris Lee joins us. We're going monster hunting. Come with us.